Session 3 for creative writing, 302, copy editing. In this week's session, we have our usual 3 assignments and our usual setup for those. We will look at our topic outcomes and our plans for this particular week. We'll look at the biblical perspective, and we will cover the reading and viewing assignments. These are in numerous places, and anytime there is a PDF or a downloadable link or an article linked in the reading list, check the student lounge as well, because I try to make those into PDFs and make them available so you don't always have to be online for them. And finally, we'll look at the 3 assignments as well as looking at the steps, because it's a tiny bit confusing this week. It will be perfectly simple when we get there, but we may have some questions as we go along. So what are we doing now? This session is where we are taking those creative works from sessions 1 and 2, and we are submitting them for peer review, which is also why our discussion thread is all about the anxiety of that and how nerve-wracking that process can be. So you are going to utilize all these skills we've been looking at. You're going to do a micro technical and a macro substantive copy edit of one of your peers' works. And in turn, you too will receive that review. By being both an author this session and an editor, you're going to see that full circle part of the process. A lot of times we are only doing one in a sense, because even when we're editing, it's our own work, and that's a really, really different process than tackling someone else's. Already you've done a wonderful job back when we were in session 1 doing copy and substantive edits to that particular work. I really enjoyed seeing what people came up with and how they approach those paragraphs, and I think honestly it would be really good if we can figure out a way for all of you to start to see that as well, that there were a lot of different things that people caught and paid attention to and had suggestions for. Obviously there are some sort of simple things that we all comment on. We all say, well, that's not quite a sentence, like let's fix that grammar or something. But there are also a lot of things where people said, well, how do you want to handle that metaphor? This analogy is getting weaker right here. And some people offer very strong suggestions saying, hey, you could do X, Y, Z, and they spell it out. Others say, you need to work on that. Do you want to talk about it? There are lots of different paths for this, and that's where we're going to start to explore this week, where we start to see, hey, everyone has a different way of handling this. What do I want to ask for? When my work is being edited, maybe I can say, hey, I really like really strong suggestions. Or I really just like it if you point out that there's a weakness there and you let me see where it should go next. So we are going to apply this copy editing knowledge. We're going to review editing of our own work from our peers. So again, this kind of thing can be a little tricky. Don't hesitate to say, hey, you want to walk through that with me when you're looking at those documents. And we're going to discuss those fears and preconceptions about what all of this looks like. So our biblical perspective this week is from Colossians 4:6. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Writing is personal and connected. It's in a sense birthing our children. These are our creative ideas, things that we have pondered and considered, sometimes things that we have experienced, and we're writing about them and we're sharing them with someone else. That is a very vulnerable place, but we can be full of grace. We can offer those supportive changes in ways that really support and encourage each other. These are not questions that are going to instantly go away or that we will solve it once and be done. With each editing process, our needs and how that other person interacts with us may very well have variations and changes in it. And especially if we have multiple editors, if we have different people looking at our material. One suggestion I'll make right now is ask that editor for what you want. Don't just say, well, is this good? What do you think? Give them some specifics. Could you look at the grammar of this? Are you catching any problems with sentence structure? What do you think about the dialogue here? Do you understand who is speaking? Do you feel like there are individual voices within this work? Ask those specific questions so that you don't get, well, that's good, I liked it, because those are terms that don't really help us. We want to be gracious, we want to be kind, but we also want to set that other person up for success as well. And if we aren't communicating, we're setting both sides of it up for at least a little bit of failure, if not more. So what are we reading and viewing? Thankfully, our reading assignments, unlike last week, are on only one slide. So we have chapter 14 in Eison and Schwartz. And then in Stein, we have quite a few required chapters, but as you know already, they are a lot of fun to read. And then 2 PDFs. Obviously, these are links to different readings you can do online. So if you'd like to stay online with those, awesome. But if you want them as PDFs that you can keep and download, or that you don't have to be on Wi-Fi all the time, check those downloads in the student lounge. So viewing, we have 3 different videos to review, and as you know already, these are great things to explore. I did forget to put the exact times on each one of these, so make sure you check those out each week and are giving the appropriate time that you're going to need. Some are 20-30 minutes, others are an hour, so we need to be prepared. So next, what are we doing? Well, we have just 3 assignments, our usual discussion thread, and then we have sort of a submission discussion thread. I'm going to sort of do this sideways, I think. Well, honestly, I think I'm just going to call it a discussion thread. So remember to watch for that we don't have, we have more than one. That's always a little tricky. There are other classes I teach with more than one discussion thread in a session, and it always kind of makes people pause. So if you land on the wrong one, I will be trying desperately to catch all of those and watch them. But remember, you can always send me a note. I can delete and move and alter. So you're good to go. So first off, we have our general discussion. And this is where we're talking about that really important topic, that fear of being edited. You are not alone in that. I cannot tell you sort of what that is like for absolutely all of us, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, whether it's academic work, whether it's our creative flow being judged. I can definitely tell you that I've had a lot more anxiety over the small creative pieces I shared than what I had over my nonfiction when I'm doing academic work. There are really strong set expectations with scholarly academic work, and so I know what I'm aiming for, and I know what the editors are aiming for, my different professors and supervisors. And that creates a little bit of security, to be honest. I appreciate that because I know where we're both coming from with it. It's not what's happening necessarily when we're looking at creative work. In class, we have a little bit of room for that because, as you'll notice, I tend to show you that rubric and then I comment on those sections on why I'm giving you those point values to go with that rubric. That gives us a little bit of space. And like I said, ask people for specifically what you want in edits. Even have that conversation with yourself. So we are going to head into this and talk about it. So here we start off with Jenkins often calls the relationship between the editor and the author a dance. Such a great analogy for it. When you don't know how to dance, the mere concept can be overwhelming. So what's your biggest fear in having your work edited? While evaluating your own fear, how can you apply this to this session's biblical perspective on being gracious when editing your work or another's work? What are your preconceptions or expectations about the relationship between an author and an editor? Share with your classmates insights and experiences you might have had on that practical relationship. One example I'll give you right away on that dance. Someone had asked if they could read the piece I was working on, and I was nervous, I was anxious, and I finally said, okay, here it is. I made a printout for you. Well, a couple weeks later, someone else approached me and they handed my manuscript back to me. And the other person was very close to that person and said, the person handing me the manuscript said, well, so-and-so never got around to having time, so I went ahead and read it. And this is what I was thinking about it. I was expecting a little bit of a dance with one person, and I was met with a very different dance with another person. And obviously, no one in that situation was trying to be rude or cruel or unkind or hurtful or scary or any of those things. But as you can well imagine, that was very upsetting for me, and it really shut down my work for quite some time because it just felt like such a breach of trust. So those kinds of things can happen, and it took me a while to think through it, to process it, and the advice the other person had included was really good advice that I needed for my work, but it took me a long time to even think about that, let alone apply it or process it. So these kinds of things are happening to all of us out there, and getting that dance going and connecting is really, really important. And I will also say that as a teacher of English, people often share everything about themselves and what they write for a paper. And I take that very, very seriously because I want every student to feel secure in that relationship that we have so that whatever they write, whatever they share, they are confident that I am going to treat them with respect. I often add extra material describing that you have shared something so important and valuable and worth exploring, and I am not writing these comments about that. I'm writing these comments about punctuation or structure, and I am directing you in writing maybe a 5-paragraph essay, or I describe what that assignment is, but I make it very clear that those grades are not about a person's experience or the validity or importance of that experience. So all of those different things happen a lot in my work, and they are things that I take very seriously and that I find to be really, really important, because it lets students explore and share and even get a little bit of therapy sometimes through what they explore. So these things are difficult things that many people are thinking about on many different levels, and they are absolutely worth exploring, not only with our class, but with anyone you want to chat with. It's a good conversation to have. So rather than just head into those next 2 assignments, I want to talk about the steps. So 1, you are going to take that work that you've just submitted to me. This is Monday, so Sunday night you turned in both pieces of your written creative scene with plot and characters, and then we start to add the senses into it. So you've written that for 2 sessions here. You combined it into one document. There are great discussions as well on the Student Lounge about what could be included in that. For instance, a student mentioned that this was an extension of something, so maybe you wouldn't understand exactly where it was starting, and that maybe we want to include that additional chapter just to sort of set the scene and let people know, hey, you don't have to read that, but if you'd like to. So lots of different sort of details to explore there. Lots of really good questions. Don't hesitate to reach out about those. So you're taking this creative thing that you've been working on these last 2 sessions at least, and you are posting it to the peer edit discussion thread. This is not the discussion we were just talking about, where we're talking about editing and that process of people interacting with your work in a critical way. Critical is really important as well. I'll pause for that. When I'm teaching literature, I often have a long conversation about this, because when we are doing a critical analysis, we are not being critical in a negative sense. We're not being mean and unkind and nitpicky. We are instead saying, how can I understand this and process this on a deeper, stronger level? We are critiquing in the greatest sense, which means that we ask difficult questions. So when we are doing a critical analysis, when we're editing, we are critiquing in the sense that we're asking really hard questions and asking a lot of ourselves as readers and asking a lot of the author as a creator. So that's what we're doing, but in that really, really positive way. So you are first posting your own work, and then you're going to go through that list and see, look at other peers' works as well. When you find one that you want to read that has not been claimed, you will post on their post saying, hey, I am choosing your work to cover. So you've posted yours. You have picked a peer and said, I'm choosing you. Then you're going to go edit that person's work. Once you finish that edit, you're going to go post it in a reply to them again. So your second post to them is to say, here is a copy of what I have done. Track changes, different things like that. Utilize whatever you'd like. I like to use track changes, and I like that catches grammar and punctuation, but I also like to add lots of comments. Those are really helpful in helping a person see what you're thinking and processing. Additionally, you're going to take that same document that you're submitting back to your peer, and you're going to turn it in to me so that I can have a discussion with you about it as well. And it really is just about all these layers, like how I'm going to look at it, and what I expect based on a rubric could be very different from what your peer is expecting. So have these conversations. Don't hesitate to say, hey, this is what I think when I am editing. I'm thinking about XYZ, and that leads to the comments I create. Have these conversations. It's really great. You don't have to go above and beyond here, but think about what you'd like to share about it. So you post your work, you pick someone else's work, you edit that work, you give it back to them, and you give it to me. Those are our steps. So let's go see. So these are the nitty-gritty details on 2 slides here of how you're going to submit that for your peer. So in a single Word document, put those pieces together. This is a good point as well to talk about Word documents versus things like PDFs. It's much harder to add feedback on a lot of those. I know how to do it, but it's not an expectation I have for any of you. So it's vital that you turn it in as a Word document. If there is an issue with that at all, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I can help you figure out what kind of format to use and how to do that. We can always Zoom, and you can share your screen as well. Lots of options right there. So we're turning it in as a Word document, and then we are borrowing from someone else. It should be your original draft. We haven't hopefully done a ton of editing, but as we talked about again in the student lounge, as we go back to add in those sentences and continue the story, we may say, "Ooh, I could add a little more over there." And so I didn't want anyone to feel like they just had to stop and not touch it again. I wanted you to feel like you could work on that piece as a greater whole. So however you wanted to tackle that is good. We're aiming to post these by Monday so that everyone has a chance to pick and choose and chat about it. Then you're going to tell that peer who you have chosen. So you want to write on it. You want to make that post saying, "Hey, I'm the first here and I've picked it." There should be room to all go around on that, but I will be keeping an eye on it to make sure we all get each other and make that circle. So by Tuesday, we should all know who we are editing. And you are sharing that in public so that everyone can know that one's already been claimed. I have to go find another one. So then, after you've done that edit, look at this particular aspect for doing the edit. You do a substantive and a copy edit. Remember, we've had all these videos, we've had all these checklists. I don't see it really as like sort of one final thing. It's a good idea to check this copy editing checklist. Consider the videos we've watched, consider the articles we've read and the chapters we've read, and think about what you want to bring to that. An issue with editing is that we can sometimes sort of cover too much, and that can make a bit of a mess in the work. So as you're going through it, don't feel like you have to find and address every possible thing. Instead, what I've learned with companies like Pearson Smart Thinking, a wonderful tutoring service, is to look for high order and low order concerns. In terms of the copy editing part, the micro, high order concerns are structure, having good, clear points, good punctuation and language. The low order concerns are, did I put a comma in the right place? That is often not going to tremendously impact how someone interacts with a work. So we are saying, that's important. Let's fix it. But the key elements of, can I understand what's happening? Is it as clear as it could possibly be? Are there details missing? That's the higher order concerns for our copy editing. And then the lower order are things like, is that comma looking good? Subject verb agreement, all that kind of stuff. So remember that there are lots of levels just in copy editing alone. And then again, for substantive editing, think about how you want to approach that. Do you want to make substantive changes yourself? Do you want to suggest them? All of those are perfectly good ways to edit. It's just about saying, like, how do I want to do that process? What sort of ruling factor is going to guide me as I go through here? I tend to offer suggestions because my goal is always for everyone to know their own voice in a much stronger way by the time they leave me. But there are a lot of ways to do that as well, and it's something that I handle on a person by person basis because each of you come in with different aspects of writing that you are stronger in or weaker in or that you want to grow in, and that's what I'm sort of interacting with each time. Again, that dance metaphor is really, really good because we are just, sliding together, moving across the dance floor, figuring out what we're doing. And some students, we want to do a waltz. Others, we want to tango. Others, we want to do, rockabilly dancing. Like, we've got to figure that out first, and then we move forward. So play with all these things. Realize that it's not about being perfect. These kinds of questions are things that I've been working on for 10 years now, and I still feel like I'm growing in them. So don't put too much pressure on it. Just go out there and try it and see what happens. So you are going to return that to them as a Word document using those track changes to offer those edits. When you've completed it, save it with all those notes and post it back to them. And then, of course, also turn it in to me as an assigned grade. So we have quite a few of these. Oops, where did I put it? I wanted it right there. We have quite a few steps this week. If at any point you feel like, oh, what's happening, don't hesitate to reach out. And remember that we have those 2 different discussion threads, so watch for those. I will be checking those to make sure we're on the right ones. Please don't feel badly if you mix them up at any point. That always happens to someone in one class or another, and I can help you copy that and paste it into the right discussion. So I'm here to help with all of those. So I will see you out there as we explore these, and I just want to thank you again for sharing, for exploring, and putting that fear beside you and behind you as you let all of us into that door to edit and explore.